Three, two, one. Hey, everybody, this is Dean with the Two Party Podcast. I'm on here with Karen Swyszcz, and I think I got that one right. Awesome. And so she is from, she does a lot of amazing things. And I think if the audience does enough of their research as I did, they'll be able to dig up quite a bit on Karen, and it's all amazing stuff. So she has a blog, Making the Bacon. She hosts a podcast called the Bacon Bits and Bytes podcast, which has a lot on tech and stuff, which I'm kind of a geek myself. I just love geeky, nerdy stuff. So I've kind of looked into that, and I was like, I got to check out some of those episodes. And she also co-authored a book called Fitness to Freedom, Create Inner Peace and Self-Confidence by Breaking Unhealthy Cycles. And there's also one that just got released November 16th, which is Lighting the North, an anthology of feminism and cultural diversity from across the nation. And so I want to welcome Karen onto the show, and I'm going to let Karen kind of tell us about herself and a little bit about some of the things that's got her where she is. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dean. So my story, I always say it's definitely not a straight line, more a lot like squiggles. So I always like to refer to it as my career path is somewhat like a jungle gym or rock climbing wall, kind of climbing all over the place. Yeah. So growing up, it was one of those things with my parents. Okay, go to school, get good grades, go to good university, okay, get a job, you're set for life. I'm like, okay, I will follow that pattern because it worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I quickly realized in university, so I started off in engineering, hated it, went to science, hated it. I'm like, this is getting expensive. So just graduated
Yep.
to please my parents. And I always joke in that my diploma, my degree is basically an expensive piece of art in my parents' family room. And then for almost a decade, I'd say, kind of bounced around different jobs, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, many different careers, also even applied to grad school twice, thinking maybe I need to go and get more education, but realized it wasn't a good fit. So I think a turning point came when I got accepted for a job in the federal government, and they thought, okay, like this is great, like set for life, just like my
Yep.
parents had wanted. I'm
Yeah.
good. And then I had quickly realized after a couple of years, given the type of person I am, always wanting to have change, challenge, getting
Mm-hmm.
bored relatively easy, I found myself to be plateauing quite quickly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really concerned me, and I know you shouldn't compare yourself to your friends because it's like apples to oranges, but you
Yeah.
can't help it because they're the people who you confide in, and you spend a lot of time talking to them. And I felt I was kind of going either backwards at times or staying in the same place while many of my friends were on this like trajectory. They were,
Mm-hmm.
starting out, then became, middle management and then directors. And I thought to myself, why am I not on that path? And I think on another turning point hit was when I started a blog. It was the blog that you had mentioned in the intro,
Mm-hmm.
Making the Bacon. It was a passion project. It was also something that sparked curiosity because I thought, okay, I'm planning a wedding. I need to find ways to make extra money. And then I found all these articles online on how you make money. But really, what it did mainly was kind of provide an outlet for me, just like a cathartic release, because I used to do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of writing as a kid, and also was able to connect with a lot of people online who were kind of going through the same thing or who had experienced kind of career blocks like I had. And from there, it just like all these opportunities, and I came and I began to get more confident. So I actually ended up leaving my government job, joining a startup with no tech experience, no tech education. I thought like, oh my gosh,
What am
what
I
am I
getting
doing?
into?
Yeah, I'm taking a big risk. And then, yeah, I was kind of met with a lot of criticism from coworkers and family. Like, what are you doing? You're leaving a steady job. But to me, at the end of the day, it was worth it to take the risk because, I was looking for that challenge and I knew I had to look outside the government in order to find it. And I was so glad I did because I had learned a lot in that year and a half. And from there, just decided to try and more things, did consulting for a bit, so helping people build their blogs and online presence uh, from 2017 2020. And then like from there also other things just kept popping up. I ended up landing a job teaching at a college, of all things, like blogging and social media, which is kind of funny
Yeah.
because it really isn't like a blogging degree or so, at least like
Mm-hmm.
not when I went to school, that
Yeah,
thing,
not yet.
it didn't exist. So it was kind of cool to share. And I continue to do this to share my experience that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like a full-time blogger, as you would probably have seen. Like there are a lot of people who have done
Yeah,
that,
there's
but
people that do that as a career.
yeah.
It's amazing.
hmm And like for me, I kind of used it more as leverage to like change careers and create more opportunities
Mm-hmm.
for myself. So kind of fast forward to around now, like starting the podcast, having the opportunity to co-author a couple of books, and then not only that, also starting a social venture. And to be honest, I don't think any of those things would have ever happened if I didn't decide to start a blog. Like I feel that's kind of like
That was the
it's what got me
platform that
here.
got
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Yeah. That's that, and it's really amazing. I find a lot of times, like you were saying, you get into a government job and you're thinking, oh, this is, I'm going to have full benefits. It's decent pay. It's going to be great on my resume, but you get in and there's certain positions, and I'm at a point in my life right now. I've 27 years in construction. I own a construction company, but I have my degree in engineering, computer software. I have a million different degrees, but every 7 years I get this little thing that I call the 7-year itch. And I literally,
Yeah.
I get tired of what I'm doing. And I've been in and out of construction for 27 years because I get into it. I love it. And then I reach a point where the passion is gone. And I'm like, I just got to turn and go do something else. I've owned and operated many businesses. I've had a computer business. And I reached a point where I was like, this is no longer fun for me. I want to do something else. And that's kind of like you were just saying. I mean, you can get a position, but still like you get in there and you're like, man, this is what I wanted. And you're passionate about it up front, but then slowly you realize it's just a 9-to-5 job. It's not as fulfilling as you were hoping. And so then you got to make changes. And I think another good thing that you just discussed is about your circle, not comparing. But at the end of the day, I always look at my friends as people to challenge me, and I like to challenge my friends. And so while we don't want to compare ourselves to other people like apples and oranges, we definitely always want to be challenged. And we definitely want to challenge those around us to help them succeed and lift them up. And I think that's, an important thing, like what you're mentioning. The blog, I think, like you said, that's kind of your springboard of your platform of what's got you where you are. And I think that's amazing. And the fact that you're able to use that platform to help other people and lift them up and kind of help push their careers, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's just funny because there are still some moments where I just think back and like almost like chuckle to myself, like, oh my gosh, like I had never guessed I would be where I
Where you
am
are.
today. I honestly thought I would be working 25, 30 years for the government. It's so strange.
Yeah. And it's one of those, like, you always think like, man, if I'm just working for the government, I get this great retirement and stuff. But then it's like, are you going to be happy in 30 years? Or where in 30 years are you going to feel still good enough to enjoy that retirement?
Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, like because I'm doing so many different things, and even like when I was a kid, I always remember like having a lot of interest, being busy doing a lot of different things. And to be honest, I think like when I so-called retire, I'll still
Yeah.
find like projects to work on, volunteer, just still keep
Yeah.
myself busy.
I tell my wife that all the time. I tell her all the time, I'm probably going to work till I'm dead, because I'm one of those people, like, an idle mind's the devil's playground. If I'm not busy and working, I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel
Yeah.
like I'm doing good for, not just for me and my family, but I don't feel like I'm doing good for my community. I feel like no matter what small impact I have in my community through my business or through my hands working, I feel like it is an impact. And I feel like there's no point in my life where I'm going to be 65, 70 years old and be like, well, that's it. I'm hanging up the tool belt and I'm done. I know I'm always going to want to be involved in something, whether it's community, family, who knows? I might even get into politics. You never know. Because Lord knows we need new politicians everywhere these days. But the main thing for me is, like, when I first started researching and looking at some of your stuff, as a podcast host, I know, and I'm sure you would agree, I never thought I'd ever get to a point where I'd be able to have, like you said, the opportunities to meet people around the world that have not only the same interests as me, but what I find most intriguing about doing podcasts is when I get guests like you and other people on, that I learn from them, and it kind of boosts me a little bit. It kind of, like, I get so encouraged by their story that I'm like, man, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah, for sure. And I really enjoy even like listening to my own interviews as well, just because like when I interview guests, I thought like, oh wow, that's really good, that's really insightful, and then yeah, I feel motivated to
Mm-hmm.
do my own thing, and like not to tune my own horn, but sometimes I'll listen to the shows where I've been interviewed on. I'm like, oh, I'm so wise. I'm like, oh, that was a good thing I said. I'm like, because you have those moments, especially like when you run your own business.
Mm-hmm.
You have those moments where you feel like the highs can be really high and the lows they can be really low. So
Yep.
it's really nice to be able to like still connect with people, especially like I've find in this day and age, when we're not really supposed to like go out and
Right.
well, we shouldn't be like interacting with people, but we can still like interact
Yeah.
through
Virtually.
technology. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, my wife all the time, she catches me. I'll be on my phone, like sitting in the living room, and I'll have a podcast of mine playing where I'm reviewing like what the guest interview was that day. And I'm kind of reviewing. She's like, "Are you sitting there listening to yourself again?" And I'm like, "Yes, you got me. I am." But I said, "I'm really listening to the guest." She's like, "Yeah, sure, sure." But it amazes me some of the things, some of the guests I get on, like yourself, that you've done so much using technology, using, not just now that we're kind of the pandemic's put us kind of in a virtual state, kind of everywhere, where it's just kind of become that thing, and it's getting more popular. But the fact that you're able to utilize platforms like starting off with your blog, and being able to reach people that way and encourage people and consult people, and then to move into podcasting and be able to do podcasts where now you're opening the doors for a wider audience, not just audience but clients, and also just kind of builds on your resume, because now you're able to reach people worldwide. And I just find that amazing. And I feel so blessed that I'm able to be a part of podcasting. It just locally here in Tulsa is where I started. And now we for some reason, when we started really going global and pushing, we ended up with like the biggest fan base in India, and then the
Oh
biggest
wow.
fan base in Australia. And I'm going, how? Like, that wasn't our target, but yet that's where we get a lot of audience feedback. But it encourages me. Again, it pushes me, it lifts me up to know that I'm not just one person in the United States that has a podcast show that may have areas in my life that need to grow. And so when I hear stories from my guests about their business and entrepreneurships and different things they've built up, it's so encouraging to me. Tell me about your book. Let's start with Fitness to Freedom. Tell me about your co-authoring that book and what that experience was like.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny because I had a goal, and it was more of a long-term goal. So like 5-10 years, I'm gonna write a book. And my mom, she's so funny. I love her. She's my biggest fan. She's like, you blog a lot and you've been writing, and I think you're, a really good writer. You should write a book. Saying like it's so easy, as in like,
Right.
you should go work out. And I'm like, okay, mom, like that's great, but with what time? And then I just kind of this opportunity came along where they were looking for authors to write a chapter for the book Fitness to Freedom, and I jumped on board right away because it really spoke to me. Like, I've always been an active kid, and although while I'm not teaching now because of the pandemic, like I am a group
Mm-hmm.
fitness instructor. I've been teaching for over a decade, and I wanted to share my story because a lot of the times the members or the people who took my classes, they'd be like, oh, you make it look so easy and you have so much fun, without them realizing how hard it
Mm-hmm.
was for me. So in the chapter, I share how much I really struggled, because despite what people think when they see me teaching on stage, I'm an introvert. I'm very,
Right.
very introverted. So it's almost as if like when I get on stage, I have this other persona.
Yeah,
But
you have to shed that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I like, okay, I need to perform because people need like energy. Like, who wants to
Mm-hmm.
go to a class where people like, okay, good job,
Yeah,
keep going.
exactly.
Like, you
All
really
right,
need
one,
to
two. Yeah.
yeah, you really need to bring it. And I actually find myself like not only being physically exhausted after, which is good, but mentally exhausted. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's drained. Like, okay, I just,
Yeah.
as if I'm thinking comparing it to maybe perhaps like performers, like
Yeah.
musicians, singers,
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm done. I kind of just need to go and recharge my batteries, kind of
Recharge. Yeah.
go alone. So yeah, I share that because I really struggled. Like, I was active, I was strong, I was working out. So I'm like, okay, That wasn't too hard, but it added being an instructor. For those people who don't know it, I feel it adds a lot of layers. So, for example, I would teach a weightlifting class. So I would, be lifting heavy weights,
Mm-hmm.
trying to be in time with the music, like going on the beat,
Yep.
being able to cue people what is the next move, and especially being able to cue them well in advance so they can prepare themselves
Be able to pivot to that. Yep.
mentally. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
then also to show the correct technique of how they're supposed to do it. And then also to also motivate them, because of course I'm human. I will maybe not, as exhausted as they are, but I still am exhausted, but I have to like show them and let them know, okay, guys, like we can, or gals, whoever you identify with, let's keep going. You've just got 4 more. Come on,
Right.
like push it, even though I'm like in my head sometimes like, oh, I
I
can't
just
push
want to
it.
go home.
So yeah, the chapter in a nutshell, just kind of, I share the process of that, because when I think of all the things I've done in my life, it is actually, I consider it to be at the probably like the top 3 of like one of the hardest things I've had to go through, just going through the
Mm-hmm.
training itself. It was not only physically exhausting, mentally, emotionally, and again, being introverted, like I felt it was really hard at
Yeah.
first to find my personality and to make it shine. I was just so concerned. And I remember going through the training. So we each had a track and exercise to perform. So we would be videotaped
You're
while
and
we're
so you're
teaching
freaking out
it.
about that.
Yeah. And then we would actually, not only that, like the class would like all together, we'd review the
Review
videotape.
it. So it's you're like, oh
And
my
I
gosh.
remember, it's funny. I wish they had like gave me a copy of it, but I remember looking at it and like watching myself, just having this kind of like blank look on my face. I think I was trying to figure out what to say next.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the instructor comments as a joke, is like, you kind of look like a deer in headlights.
Well, yeah, pretty
Because
much.
like trying to like do so many things at the same time. And now, I
And
mean,
trying to think ahead for the next
yeah.
process. Yeah.
I mean, now after 10 years, it comes so easy, but like
Yep.
the first few years, it took a long time. And I honestly like had that imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of people feel when they're trying something new. It's like, who am I to do this? Like, am I even good enough? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not an extrovert. Like, can I do this? But I'm so glad like I pushed on, because it's given me so much confidence, like, just to take on more things, like knowing that if I was able to achieve that, then,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I can do even more.
I don't think people realize and don't give enough credit to like personal trainers and people that are in the fitness world. I know a lot of friends that bodybuild and do competitions, and that is something. And I started like 2-3 years ago back getting into weights and stuff, and kind of taking a little better care of my physique. And I literally I think it was like for 3 months, I went on like basically this diet that you would do for competition. It's difficult to even like bodybuilders, people don't realize how hard it is to just be on that diet. Like I did it for like 3 months, and I just to kind of train down some weight and kind of build some muscle. And dude, it was like 5 meals a day on the meal plan. And I'm like, how do I eat 5 meals a day? And I'd be forcing the food down to get the calories to keep the muscles going. And it was difficult, but I agree with you that there is so many layers to something like that. It's not just easy to be an instructor, where, like you said, you're trying to stay ahead. You're trying to get everybody doing the proper movements. You're not trying to get somebody injured. But there's so much work and dedication and education that goes behind it that I don't think a lot of people take for granted. I know I have a membership at the gym, and I work out at home. Obviously now with the pandemic, to me it's safer, and I have a home gym, so why not use it? But I have this gym membership at one of the good gyms around the corner, and you go in there and you see people that are personal trainers, and it's like, how did that guy, sometimes you take for granted that person is in the position they are, and they didn't just get there by, doing an overnight or an online class. I mean, they literally had to put in the physical work. They had to put in the educational work, the dietitian work. And it is so many layers to doing that. And I think one of the things that you bring a good point about is that whether you're introvert or extrovert, I think it's being in that position where you're a teacher or a leader in the fitness world, you kind of have to grow into that and through those layers, because there's image. As human beings, we automatically have this crazy image, like where it's either self-confident, like we look good, or we don't. And then we're worried about how others feel. When you're teaching a class of say 15, 20 people or more, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm center stage. I am who they're looking at for instruction. So I'm sure that must be super difficult. And I taught English for a while. And I taught GED level for adults for a while. And so I kind of know a little bit about education and stuff. And I'm kind of introvert, but my wife, she yells at me all the time because I'm super extrovert. Like, we're in public, I'll run up to a stranger and have a conversation. And she's like, shut up. They don't want to know you. Leave that person alone. You're harassing them, because I'm outgoing that way. But then there's times where I just want to be left alone, and I just really need to have some time to reset. But it is very difficult to be in that fitness world and that personal trainer. I started to do personal training for a few years, and I think I made it about 2 years in, and I kind of got tired of it. It was back when I boxed, and I was training boxing, and so I was always in the gym, and I was like, boy, I should take this to the next level and be a personal trainer. And I started doing it, and about 2 years in, I'm like, I don't think I can deal with people this way, like on this level. Like, I just reached a point where I knew, like, this wasn't for me.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I remember going to like a group fitness class when I joined a gym way back in the day, and I thought, oh, like they look like they're having a lot of fun. The instructor's like, that looks easy. I'm like, maybe I should try and do that without even realizing, as we talked about, how much work goes into it. So of course, like going back to the training, you went to, having my butt kicked.
Yep.
Big time. I also actually was a personal trainer for a little bit. But I didn't even last like a year, like quickly realizing I love fitness, but I didn't like the person. I don't know, just
side of it.
Yeah, the personal, and I don't know, maybe it's going back to like, for me being an introvert, but I found I preferred the group setting. So that's why I still kept with the fitness instructing. But for me, personal training wasn't for me.
That was, you nailed it right on the head. It was that personal one-on-one where, like, I can engage with people really well. But for me, being a personal trainer, when I was doing, I was like, sometimes they come to me with problems, and I didn't feel I was equipped to be the person to fix. And it wasn't about the fitness, and it wasn't about that. It was like, they'd come in and they had life problems. And I was like, I'm not a counselor. I'm sorry. I'm a personal trainer, and it was like, I just felt uncomfortable in that situation. And I was like, too many people are coming to me with their problems, and it almost puts the problems in my lap, and I don't want to wear them, and I'm one of those people that I care, and I genuinely love people. And I'm like, if they bring me their problems, I'm going to try to work through them, and it's going to cause stress for me. And so I was like, I don't know if I can really do that right now. So tell us a little bit about the other book you co-authored. So Lighting the North, an anthology of feminism, cultural diversity from across the nation. Tell us what got you into that writing.
Yeah, so around the same time that opportunity to co-author another book came up. So Lighting the North features stories of women like across Canada, essentially growing. A lot of them have to do with like, what is it like being a newcomer to Canada or growing up in Canada. And for me personally, my chapter, it had to do what was like growing up as a Filipino Canadian in Canada. So my parents, they immigrated separately to Canada in the 70s and met in Toronto. Okay. And growing up in my neighborhood, it was mainly European. It was interesting. It was one of those things where you don't really see race or how you're different until, I guess, it's kind of pointed out to you, or you start to notice like things around you. And it was just one of those things where I tried to be as Canadian as I could, because
you try to fit in culturally as best you can.
Even though I didn't look, I guess at the time, like typically what a Canadian, like of mainly like European background. So I actually, would prefer to bring like sandwiches, and I was even little things like concerned about the food my mom would cook when I have friends over, and I tell her like, Mom, like, please don't cook that. It has a weird smell. And this was at a time where like where I grew up, it was multicultural, but not as multicultural as it is now. Like now I think people are more interested in trying like different foods and exotic foods, because like they were traveling. But growing up, I felt like it wasn't a really like Filipino food wasn't known at the time. I think people were only more familiar with like Chinese food or like Japanese. And then not only that too, like I got teased a lot as a kid. So like for having the last name, as I mentioned prior to the interview, like Yap. And of course, when you think about it, you can actually, it rhymes with a lot of things. So I think like slap crap. And
yeah. So you got picked on a little bit for that stuff.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that some kids would be like, "Stop yapping so much." But again, I'm an introvert, so
Right.
the irony was like I didn't even really talk.
Yeah, didn't talk. Kept to
that much.
yourself.
So yeah, it was kind of with the chapter just talking about how much actually I hid my identity, or I didn't feel really proud. I think like, no, I identify more with Canadian. I was born here. I grew up here. I say a lot. You know, I like watch, you know, I go like hardcore when it's the, you know, US Canada finals of the hockey.
It's like, Canada.
Go Canada, go.
Yep. Sometimes I'm cheering for Canada because the US is a mess. Yeah, the US is becoming an absolute nightmare. And sometimes I'm like, Canada, here I come. I'm on my way.
Yeah, so the story also talks about how I recently reconnected with my identity in my 30s, and I figure, you know what, it's better late than never. So that I co-founded a social venture called Kaibigan Connection, and it was based out of curiosity. I'm like, there's a relatively large Filipino population in the area, but I feel like a lot of them have businesses. Like, why don't we try and find them and connect with them? And like from there, it sprung. I mean, it was really more so an idea, kind of like, let's test it, try it out. I mean, like we still are testing ideas, but now it's kind of evolved into a business where we want to continue to provide events. I mean, like virtual at the time, but also look into providing services for them, such as like a directory membership and like online courses. But it's really strange because again, I had never anticipated that, but I had found, you know, I really enjoyed connecting with other people and even learning more about my culture, and like, oh, you know what, it's never too late. It's never too late to start a business, never too late to learn anything, start over again. You just kind of have to have that mindset, you know, I'm willing to adapt and to change. And I think, again, just not to talk about the pandemic, but you can't help but talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, we live in it. It's become, it's our world now. Yeah.
Like a lot of people are reinventing themselves and realizing, you know, it's okay. And you know what? Sometimes change is for the better.
I think sometimes, you know, you make a good point. Challenge, you know, when we reach a point where we're not pushing ourselves and making changes and challenging ourselves, we come to a point of complacency. And I think that's where we tend to see a lot of people struggle with stress, maybe mental health or depression, anxiety. Kind of it sets in when we're not challenging ourselves and continuing to pivot to different new things or learn new things. You know, I know, as you know, as obviously as human beings, we have the great brains, great reasoning skills. We're supposed to learn. We're supposed to get better. We're supposed to improve. You know, life is too short to just be like A to B. And then now that I know A to B, that's where I can stay the rest of my life. And I think another thing that you just mentioned that brought up a really good point about the cultural, where we're at as a society culturally. We've changed so much. Like you said, when you were growing up, I remember when I was growing up, it was kind of the same thing. Traditionally, everything was like, you know, your general community or environment was what it was. So it was like, if you grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and I was, you know, and I did, and several times we lived in predominantly Black neighborhoods, and I was the only white kid around. So guess who was the target of everything, you know? And at the same time, I also made some of the best friends and relationships out of those areas. But it's one of those things where, like, culturally as a society, we've come a long way. And I think it's because you know, obviously our earth is just, and every country is just populated immensely, and people have shifted and moved around. I mean, obviously here in the United States, we probably have one of the most diverse nations. Honestly, we're a big mess here, but at the end of the day, we have the most diverse cultural, you know, nation there is, because we have everybody. There's every cultural background represented in the United States. And I think other countries have the same thing, but I think a lot of people just kind of flock here because of supposedly the freedoms we have. Which we do, but you know, we see that day in and day out, you know, just kind of changing as a society. And I think it's because all these cultures getting together are kind of making decisions to say, look, we want a better world. We want a better place to live. We want a better future. We want businesses. We want to be able to help our families. And I think when you have all that, it changes the dynamic. And culturally growing up, I think, like, back, you know, I was born in 76, so I'm an old man. But I always look back at, like, the way my parents were and the way some of my family was, the traditional, what we always thought of in society, the traditional, like you said, in Canada, European Canada, that's how it was. And it was like, people weren't willing to step out and see, when they see something different, it was easier to tease it than to actually know it or get to know it. And you make a really good point about it's never too late to learn your cultural background. We see a lot of popularity in like the ancestry.com, and we see a lot of those things that are like really popular because people want to know their heritage. And I think it's important that everybody does know their heritage. I mean, it's okay to embrace the country you're in, but it's more important that you know who you are ancestrally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think like the great thing about diversity is not just like the food, but also the different experiences and different schools of thought that people can bring to the table. And this is why like, we have so many great products, so many innovative things.
Yeah, and you see that more and more every day. You see more businesses popping up that in one culture is very popular, and we never had it before, and now all of a sudden it's a thing, it's a fad. And I personally, I enjoy that. I love, like I said, I love new things. I like experimenting with new things. I love food. So yes, food is one of those things in any culture I'm willing to try. And it's, my wife, she's more like, I don't know if I want to try that. I'm going to stick to the meat and potatoes. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go have the sushi, the lobster, and anything else I can find on the table that I've never seen. And it's just, I like to go there. And don't let me mispronounce this. It's Kaibigan connection.
Oh, it's yeah, pretty essentially.
Because I pulled it up while we were talking.
Kaibigan, yeah.
Kaibigan, okay.
Yeah, it means like friend in Filipino.
Okay,
Or like Tagalog is the official Filipino language.
And so is that based, is that when you started this, is that based for your area specifically started, or is it something where you kind of met some people virtually and it's just kind of a bigger network?
So originally we had started in the greater Toronto area and thought like our focus would be there. But then as we began to have more events, and the funny thing is we weren't even planning on having more events, but people after the first event came up to us either in person or then messaged us online afterwards. They're like, hey, that was like a great event. When's the next one? And then I thought, oh, there's supposed to be a next one. I'm like, oh, okay. So like the pressure was on. And as we began to have more events, like people from other areas came, and the beauty of having virtual events was that we were able to attract other people. So we've had people from outside of the Toronto area. So in other provinces, such as Winnipeg and Alberta, Manitoba, Alberta, British Columbia, and then even in the Northwest Territories, even further north,
very cool.
the Yukon, and then had a few people from the States attend, and also even one person from the Philippines. So, actually like sacrificed, his sleep to attend our event, which was really cool. And that's one of the reasons why I think virtual events are amazing. I do know that it's not the same as in person, but it provides a lot of benefits in that, it provides accessibility for people who, may not be able to attend for whatever reason. And then even cost wise too, because let's be honest, a lot of like conferences and events, like they are pretty expensive. So you have to pick and choose. Whereas with the virtual events, I was like, okay, I can go to this, and this, and this before I get like, zoomed out or I get sick of video calls.
Yeah. So. We did a local event for our community called Unity Social. And so we did that. It was called Us, Unity Social. And so we did that as a local community event. Several years ago, we kind of promoted it from our business, but at the same time, it was basically me and my wife kind of reaching out to the community and business owners. And what we did is it was a huge event, and it was a no cost to everybody. So we footed the bill. We literally paid for the venue. We paid for everything we could to get it. And then I literally walked everywhere in our community, door to door, to every single business, and invited them to come and promote their business for free advertising, free everything. And we did, and it was a success. We had a really good turnout. But it, like you said, it cost a fortune. And at the end of the day, virtual is amazing in the aspect that you're not spending that much money up front in a thing, but you can literally have hundreds of people. I mean, you could do a virtual event that can attract hundreds of thousands of people globally that you may not have been able to get them to your event in a physical location. And the other thing that I noticed that's becoming more and more prevalent is that, me and another guest talked about this, is you're not going to see in the future. This is what it is. This is what we're probably moving toward, is businesses and as a whole will continue to do virtual business. And you will start seeing less people in brick and mortar stores. We will even see less retail that way. And so it's kind of one of those things where you almost nowadays you have to embrace it. Now's the time to learn it, because a lot of businesses that have been shut down due to lockdowns or whatever, they're not going to open back up the traditional way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're seeing a lot more of that. How do you feel about like your businesses that you run? How do you feel about that in the future? I mean, I mean, in the industry you're in, obviously you can use virtual, the platform actually works for you. How do you see that overall in business?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It kind of ties back to, I guess, when people are thinking about starting a new business, they kind of have to get into this mindset thinking about like, what are the upcoming trends?
Mm-hmm.
How can I utilize technology, or how can I operate with next to none resources? And
Yeah.
I think also, especially businesses need to have that mindset. I'm going to have to adapt. Okay, I've adapted the pandemic, but who's to say, it won't happen,
Come back.
something, come back,
Yeah.
or something else might happen in the
Mm-hmm.
future. So just kind of, having that mindset that, you're like, as we talked about before, still being comfortable with learning. Like, even if you've reached a point where you're like successful, I still think it's important to keep on learning, keep on pivoting. And I had mentioned this in another podcast, just thinking of companies who had failed to adapt, such as like Blockbuster
Yep.
or Kodak,
Yep.
when it came to digital photography, and look at them now.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't start to like think outside of the box, or even think as if there is no box, the box didn't
Yeah.
exist, then you may not be able to thrive.
Yeah. And I think that's what we and this, the other guests were discussing. I think that was one of our topics, was we were kind of looking at like, so where do we go from here? Where do business owners go from here? Some businesses, traditional mom and pop businesses, and a lot of, I hate to say mom and pop, but it's true. Some of the older generations that are still using cash registers, they're not set up digital. They're not set up with electronic everything. And it's just because they're traditional like that. A lot of those, unfortunately, those stores will not get past this if they can't adapt. And so a lot of those are going to shutter. And so for me, I think, luckily, my degree's been in engineering and computers and stuff. So to me, I love it. I think it's cool. It gives me more, as much as I get out of it a lot, I tend to go back to it and go, well, this is a good opportunity for me to kind of push my degree a little bit, even if I'm not leaning on it. And I feel like in business as a whole and as entrepreneurs, I think this is actually a really good opportunity, not just for your business and to expand that way and stay, I guess, relevant, but also to offer your employees new training techniques. Because at the end of the day, you can't just shift an entire business into electronic and virtual without training. And if you do, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. So to me, it's also a good opportunity for me, like even in construction, my guys in the field, I got guys in the field that have flip phones still, and they don't know what a smartphone even does or how crazy the technology is. So a lot of them on the field, we got to call them, and you hope they answer the phone or they didn't drop it. And so what I'm finding is we're having to kind of train, give out the smartphones and train some of our guys to learn the technology, and then also have them be able to FaceTime or use Zoom for virtual in the field. And sometimes that makes our jobs and our projects go easier, which is something in the past, like, in construction, you've got a productivity level and a deadline to meet. You're not so much worried about doing Zoom meetings and stuff, but we're finding it to be more useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think now also, given like the technology we have, it is easy. Well, not say easier, but I mean, like we have access like to learn all these things, and if you're willing to learn them, I believe you can. And again, just kind of tying back to like, I have a science degree. I'm not really using it in a sense like working in a lab. Like I
Mm-hmm.
kind of took it upon myself to try and learn new skills, and still am
Yeah.
learning new skills. So I think maybe for a lot of people, having to deal with like the learning to learn again
Yeah.
can be something else.
For sure. So another thing we touch base on a lot on Two Party Podcast is we push a lot of self-help, mental health awareness, things like that. So I want to ask you, what are some things that you've used in the past, or things you currently use, that help you overcome maybe some anxiety, stress? Because we have a lot in our audience. We really push for a lot of I personally have lost about 8 people this year, a couple to suicide, a couple to overdoses and addiction, people I just grew up with. And so I try to always, the journey I've been on for the past like 6 years has literally been a self-reflection journey for me. And it's literally looking at myself in the mirror and kind of learning ways to improve myself daily, to be a better person, better husband, better father. And so what are some things that maybe you could give the audience, just some coping tools that maybe you've used for anxiety, stress, or just getting you through a hard time in business even, that you could maybe share with us?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my tools and like the things I do are relatively simple, but again, I think like those are the best ones. And I've found for me personally, my anxiety goes up when I am constantly checking the numbers and the
Mm-hmm.
news. Like
Yeah.
of course, I feel it's important to be informed, to know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
what are the latest restrictions in your particular region. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't think it's healthy to constantly be checking the news and seeing like the number of cases if they're rising in your particular area. So I've tried to not look at the news every
Mm-hmm.
day, which I found has actually helped. There'll actually even
Yes.
be a few days where I don't even know like what's the latest updates, and then
Yeah.
I feel better. And of course, like fitness, because we talked about that,
Mm-hmm.
has helped me. Although like I have been working out at home as well, in the basement, and
Mm-hmm.
to be honest, I still get a good workout and I feel good, but for me, it wasn't the same in comparison to like going to the gym, especially
Yeah.
like teaching my classes, that social aspect. Because even of course, even as an introvert, I still need a little bit of social activity. But I had
Mm-hmm.
felt that working out, that helped me. But also it's strange. Like I think the pandemic, it helps people like discover or rediscover things. So what I've recently got into that I never thought I would really get into is road cycling. So I have a
Okay.
bike, but
Very cool.
I'd play it safe and be like, oh, I'll just go in the park trails along my neighborhood.
Yep.
Like everything's fun and safe. But it was so funny. It was a random weekend morning. I'm like, I'm wide awake. It's 6 a.m. What do I do? Like, oh, I'll just go for a bike
Hop on
ride.
the bike.
Yeah, and it was actually really freeing, like being
Mm-hmm.
on the roads with like barely any cars, and just to be able to get outside. And yeah, I started to get really, really into it, like waking up, even setting my alarm on a Sunday morning, which my husband
Right.
thinks I'm crazy, and going for these like an hour and a half rides. But it's just been like such a good activity, I find, because like you get outside, you're able to like get your physical activity, and of course you can socially distance
Yeah. Yeah.
from people. So it's been really nice. So I feel like that has actually like helped me. But unfortunately, now that it's like snowing and I
It's
don't
like,
think I'll
can't do
go.
that. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, now I need an indoor exercise bike. So
Right.
that has really helped. Another thing too, actually, I used to do a lot of baking when I was
Mm-hmm.
younger, and like work got in the way and I got busy with like my business and all the other projects. But with the pandemic, I had a little bit more time in my hands. So I got into baking.
Very
Sorry, I said
cool.
bacon. That's a slip.
Hey, everybody loves bacon.
I
Everybody
don't
loves
bake.
bacon.
I don't bake with bacon though. But I got into
Hmm.
baking, and then I realized how much I miss it and how much I enjoyed it. And it's like I guess because it plays upon a lot of your senses, not
Yeah.
just like especially like the smell and the taste, and even like
Mm-hmm.
working with your hands, like when I'd be like making the dough for cookies or pies. But it's funny because for those who know me, they know how much I hate cooking, like hate with a capital, like. But of course, I love baking, and I think it's
Right.
probably because I have a sweet tooth, and baking is just more
Yeah.
fun, I
It's way
feel
more
overall.
fun. It is.
So yeah,
It
those are
is
like the main things that I find have been helping me.
helpful.
So I think having a hobby, or maybe even looking back to like an old hobby, sorry, I can't talk today. An old hobby people have
Yep.
taken up. Maybe if you want to relearn a musical instrument, or get into drawing. And I think also like the creative part too, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have found therapeutic, because we're spending so much screen time, and even the additional screen time, right?
Yep.
Because now our meetings are not in person anymore. So I think doing things such as maybe like knitting, drawing, painting,
Mm-hmm.
puzzles, that is also a good thing to look into, because again, you can kind of like shut off that part of your brain, turn on like I guess the more relaxed part of your brain, and just kind of like work creatively flee.
Yeah, for sure. My wife started doing exactly what you just said. She decided to start doing, she set up like an online retail where she's doing, it's basically arts and crafts, but she makes a bunch of different little like gnome characters and ornaments and different stuff. And she just started doing that. And it kind of, that kind of helps guide her day. Like, things get stressful, she can go in and kind of work on products and items for her business. And she just has fun doing that. I think you made a really strong point in the beginning. Like immediately what hit me is a lot of people focus on the news, and I think it's almost scary that we as a society have always depended on getting our information from the news. And we just assume that the information we're getting is healthy for us, or that it's going to be so insightful or impactful that it's what we have to know every day at 5 o'clock or morning show or evening news. And I think more and more, I think as a society, and I think around the world, people are seeing that the media is kind of really not that healthy for you sometimes. The information that you're getting sometimes is overwhelming and really stressful. And I think this pandemic, like you said, this is really like watching the numbers is almost like being in the gym watching your weight. It's almost like going and jumping on a scale every day and expecting to lose 10 pounds, and instead you went up a pound. And it's one of those, like, it's truly unhealthy. And I was just, it's funny because again, I'm a journalist too. And so the news is one of those things like I'm stuck having to deal with because I need to know what's going on as a journalist. Unfortunately, even I step back from it because it just really to focus on the numbers of deaths and who's sick and this and that. That's really unhealthy to kind of focus on. And then some of the things going on in our world, if it's not hitting our community directly or impacting my family directly, I kind of take a break from it. I kind of step back and I'll turn the TV off on the news, And I think that's important. You made a very important point on that. Is sometimes it's a matter of just, I like to say, turn the boob tube off. Just turn that TV off. And that means all the time, like you said, we're getting more screen time, not just in our daily life staring at our phones, but also, being on virtual interview, virtual, whatever it may be online with business and stuff, staring at computer screens all day. But then just to come home and then turn the TV back on. It's like, or if you're already home and you're taking a break and you just turn the TV on, it's almost a disservice. It's almost like, when you could be, like you said, you could be baking, not cooking, but you could literally do anything, and I like what you said about revisiting something. There's a lot of people that, as we become adults or when our lives get a little busier, we become parents, whatever it may be. There's a lot of things from our childhood we forget that we were good at. Whether it's playing an instrument, as you can see my guitar on the wall there. Yeah, I just make noise with that thing. I used to be able to play and I'm horrible at it now. And it's like, I keep trying, but it's just noise. But it's an outlet for me. Like I can sit in here, get in the studio and kind of get some music out and kind of practice. But I think it's important, like you said, to revisit those things. If we have things we were really incredibly passionate about or maybe good at when we were younger, this is a great time to revisit that and say, hey, I was good at playing an instrument, or I was good at whether it was baking or cooking or whatever it may be. Take that up again and try it, as an outlet to help relieve stress, take your mind off maybe the day's battles. And then obviously number one for me has been exercise lately. I wake up in the morning, I work out anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, depending on what muscle groups I'm doing, if I want to do cardio or whatever. So when I go in, I wake up in the morning and I physically go at it hard. And then usually by like 7 o'clock, I'm out the door working construction. Or on days like this, I get lucky and I get to sit in the studio and do guest interviews. But I think exercise is key for me. It's really been one of those things that's always got me through the hardest times in my life. I know I can turn to the gym or weights or cardio, or even just go take a jog down the street and to do some running. And it gets me to, A, I get alone time, and B, I get a moment where I know I'm doing good for my body. So the mental, the spiritual, the physical, all of it's getting put back into a balance, I think. And for me, that's always good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on exercise, like really helping me through some tough times. Like I remember having some, really low moments in my life, and knowing that like exercise would always like help me get through it. And it's funny because a lot of people think it's like a habit, like, oh, I need to develop good habits. I need to eat better and exercise more. But like the way I see it, and you probably would agree with me, is that it's not just a habit, really. It's like a lifestyle.
Yes. And it has to become that. It is about forming the good habit, but like you said, it has to be a lifestyle. You have to integrate all of that to really balance things out, where your mental, spiritual, and your physical is all on one level. Because when one thing gets out of whack, we know our lives get crazy, and tell us a little bit, before we get off of here, tell us a little bit about where our guests and our audience can find some information about you, any of your social media platforms, websites. Tell us all about where those are, and if there's any other announcements you want to get out there.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to say, like, I feel like I'm pretty much everywhere except probably like Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube.
Yeah.
But still on a lot of platforms. But if people want to check out my website, they can visit me at makingthebacon.com. With respect to social media, I am mainly active on Twitter, Instagram, and also like LinkedIn if they like. So my Twitter and Instagram handle is Making the Bacon with the number 1 at the end. And this joke, I love to tell it because, not to sound like Dr. Seuss, but Making the Bacon was already taken. So I couldn't have the handle Making the Bacon alone. I had to have a 1 on it. And then if they'd like to check out my podcast, it's on the major platforms, Spotify, iTunes, you name it. It's called the Bacon Bits and Bytes, the letter N, and then Bytes, Bytes, because it talks about like technology and technology related topics.
Very cool. And what do you have any insight on what your next episode on the Bacon Bits and Bytes podcast? You guys have an upcoming episode?
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Actually, I do, but like, to be honest,
is it a secret?
No, sorry, no. It's because I'm like a 1-person show. I'm actually pretty behind on like editing. So this episode was recorded back in October, but it has to do with I don't want to give like too much away about it, but like it has to do with an app about like how we can connect with other people better. So again, it's kind of interesting to see like more platforms like community based and how we can connect with like other people outside of our inner circle.
Very cool. And do you know about when that episode will be coming out for our audience to know?
I feel like the pressure. If I give a date, then I'm like,
don't do it then. I don't want to set you up for failure here. No, don't do it. Don't do it.
How about I give a range? I'll say end of December, early January.
Okay,
so at least that gives me a bit of a buffer.
so everybody in the audience, we're going for a New Year's episode, and that's what we're hitting on. All right. I like that. Well, Karen, it's been amazing having you on here. And as we discussed a little bit before the show, we always like to have a guest on once, and that way the audience gets to know you. And so today they had an opportunity to get to know you. And then we always invite guests in the future to come back on for second, third, as many episodes as they can schedule and get back on the show. So we will have you on in the future. And we always want to let you know and let the audience know that if there's anything that comes up in your life that you want to immediately promote, you can always reach out to us, and we can get an immediate episode up and get live, whatever we want to do, so that we can help you promote. Because at the end of the day, this show is really about 2 people talking, but it's about the guest. And then it's also about giving the audience the resources they need to get in contact with you for the information they hear. And so we will have you back on in the future for sure. We'd love to have you back. Anything else?
No, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on again. Like, hopefully, so a lot of exciting things will have happened by then that we could share. But thank you so much for having me on the show. This is a really great conversation. I enjoyed chatting with you today.
For sure. Thank you, Karen. I did too. And I look forward to having you back. You have a great day.
You too.